Let's continue the Stormlight Archive recaps, and now we're going to jump into Book 2, Words of Radiance. All right, let's start with a quick recap of the prologue. So we start off 6 years ago, just before Gavilar's assassination. We are in Jasnah's POV, and she's actually on her way to meet with an assassin named Liz. Now, on the way there, she passes a Shin man in white, and then she starts seeing weird things, like her shadows pointing in the wrong direction, and then this shadowy figure appears with a sword. Rightfully, she freaks out, and she ends up in Shadesmar. She does end up making her way back out by utilizing the beads and her stormlight. And then when she comes back, Gavilar is being killed. Jasnah ends up talking to the Parshendi, who take credit for this afterwards, and she asks them why, and they say that he was about to do something very dangerous. Part 1 opens up in Shallan's POV, and she and Jasnah are on a ship headed to the Shattered Plains. They talk a lot while on the ship, and we learn some new information. We learn that Spren come from something called the cognitive realm, because they're basically like living ideas, and people live in the physical realm. Jasnah also tells Shallan that her Spren is not very talkative about certain things from the past, and we glean that humans had some sort of betrayal towards the Spren, and likely a lot of Spren died, and that's why they're kind of cagey about speaking of the past. This is also where Pattern first starts showing up, and then Jasnah is talking to Shallan, and she tells her that she sent Shallan's family a small gift to tide them over for now, and that the way that they can address the Ghost Bloods wanting the Fabrial is that maybe her mother, Navani, can fix the Fabrial because she's like a Fabrial wizard. And then this is also where we get that Shallan is casually betrothed to Adolin, and Jasnah expects Shallan to be kind of upset at her being, thrown into an arranged marriage, but Shallan's basically like, hell yeah, this is amazing. Like, I don't even have to worry about this. That's great. Shallan also has a very important takeaway from Jasnah, and that's power is an illusion of perception, and Shallan will be using this. We jump to Kaladin's POV next, and we learn that Dalinar has given Kaladin 20 buildings for all of the bridgemen, so they're going to break their bridgemen into 20 groups of 50 men, and they're going to try and train them up to be part of Dalinar's fighting forces. We also see Kaladin's men go and get tattoos to cover up their slave brands. They do a freedom glyph and then also one for Bridge 4. Kaladin tries to do this as well, but his Stormlight keeps healing the tattoo, so he doesn't get to do this. And then they also go and get outfitted in Cobalt Guard uniforms. We go back to Shallan, and she ends up capturing Pattern's likeness on paper, and then he kind of rises from it and becomes 3D, and that is her Spren. And Shallan is told by Jasnah to study him, and we learn that Jasnah's Spren is like a little man wearing like a fashionable suit, and his name is Ivory. Apparently, Shallan's Spren is a cryptid, and they are like the light eyes of the cognitive realm, which is kind of funny because they both look at Pattern like kind of banging his head into a wall and like swirling around in circles, and they're like, he's kind of dumb. We hop over to Dalinar next, and he's describing his vision out loud to Navani, and he says he's at the Pure Lake and they're looking for something, him and some Radiance and some men, and it turns out they're looking for a Spren that does not belong. He ends up seeing a Spren with red eyes in the water, and then they also see this rock monster raise up from the ground. Terrifying. Dalinar hears that voice he always does, and it's saying that the Knights Radiant were created to offset the destruction brought about by the desolations. They were 10 orders of knights, but this bond between Spren and some of these Surge Binders was not expected by the Almighty. That was them replicating kind of what the Almighty was doing. And then he tells Dalinar that he needs to find a way to vex Odium and then try and get him to put forth a challenger that they can challenge, and that's their best bet at survival against him. He also says that Dalinar needs to refound the Knights Radiant and create a fortress that can withstand these storms. After the vision, Dalinar makes out with Navani some more. Dalinar goes to sleep, and when he wakes up, there are glyphs on his wall, the number 62, and then the words "death follows." From Kaladin's POV, we hear about Dalinar's proclamation to the High Princes that he's changing the way plateau assaults are going to go, that the king and he will decide on pairings of 2 High Princes to go to get the gem hearts, and then based on, their efforts, the spoils will be divided amongst them. Obviously, people are really not happy about this, and they're also not happy about having to also follow the codes. We get a Sadeas POV next, and he's looking at his new sword. and scheming. His wife comes in and she's like also a schemer, and they're gonna get their men basically into these open positions that Dalinar is left with after a bunch of his men got killed. And Sadeas is talking about how he wants to sow discord amongst the other high princes, create conflict, and if that conflict doesn't take down Dalinar, he will resort to his wife's assassins. He said he's going to conquer this kingdom and then Yaakoved afterwards. Yeah, okay. We go back to Shallan and we see that Pattern, who's also called a lie spren, but they don't really like that name, but he can tell when people are lying. He's getting smarter. He's starting to communicate with Shallan. Shallan's also realizing she is a surge binder. She ends up using Stormlight and makes the deck go green. And then she goes to Jasnah to get more spheres that do have Stormlight in them, and Jasnah looks distraught. Shallan makes Jasnah talk, and she says that she's afraid of a large-scale, awakening / attack by the Parshmen because of the way that they see the Parshendi can communicate, via their songs, no matter the distance apart them. So they're very worried about that. And then Jasnah also tells Shallan that she thinks the answer is in the Shattered Plains. She thinks that the gateway to Urithiru may be there, and if they can get there, they might find, ancient records and things that could be helpful for them. Shallan wakes up to screams and fire and chaos. She comes out of her cabin and she sees these men plunge a dagger into Jasnah's chest. They say, "Be sure," they do it again. So far as Shallan sees, Jasnah is dead. Pattern is talking to her and he's trying to get her to use the sword to fight back, and Shallan says, "Nope." So he says, "Use the light, use the lies." We go back to Dalinar, and he's watching Adolin lead his forces along with another high prince on a plateau assault. And Dalinar is talking to this high prince, and he's basically telling him, your new system, it benefits the weakest among us, it hurts the strongest. And even if I could trust you, I can't trust the other high princes. So essentially, Dalinar's plan is not working out. And then the Parshendi Shardbearer shows up, but they aren't part of the fighting. And then Navani shows up, and Dalinar gets the message that a friend is coming to the Shattered Plains, and Dalinar is hopeful that this person can have some answers to some of their problems. We get another Kaladin POV. He's at a meeting with the king and Dalinar and some of the high princes. Long story short, he ends up butting into their conversation and says, the best thing to do with these high princes is to disarm them. And Dalinar takes from that, and his idea is to allow Adolin to start dueling people again. And this time, he's going to try to duel for shards, because if they can hold all the shards in the war camps, they'll hold the power. Dalinar also drops the bomb that he wants to refound the Knights Radiant. Kaladin almost shits himself. He does not know if Dalinar knows about his power or not. And Dalinar also tells him that he wants Kaladin's men to start also watching the king, because Dalinar's men need to be out there fighting. We then get another Shallan POV, and this is a flashback from 6 years ago. Her father is carrying her, and he's telling her, "Pretend it never happened, I'll protect you," and he steps over her mother's corpse. Present day Shallan ends up using her Stormlight and Shadesmar to make the bottom of the boat disappear, sending everybody into the ocean. She washes up on shore. She doesn't see anybody else, but she does see Jasnah's trunk. She ends up trying to start a fire with her Stormlight, and we get the infamous "I am a stick," and it does not want to turn into fire. So no fire for Shallan. She ends up wandering around until she sees a campfire, and she just passes out in front of it with these strangers. She wakes up to them poking at her, saying "brightness," and they are Thaylen slavers. And remembering what Jasnah told her before, she basically just pretends to be a high up, haughty Light Eyes and says, "Sure, you can assist me." And they take her to the Shattered Plains. We end part one with Kaladin. He's in the chasms with his men, and Teft is training up their new recruits. Syl talks to Kaladin, and she mentions how she's been seeing these red lightning spren that are definitely bad news. And she tries to tell him that he needs to become what Dalinar is looking for, but he is scared to share what he is. He's afraid that the Light Eyes will take it from him, as they've taken so much already. And then he goes and tells Sigzil that they can start, testing his abilities. So Rock, Sigzil, and Lopin are with Kaladin, and they're just testing out what he can do. He's able to stick Lopin to a wall, and he's able to use his abilities while he's fighting them. So lots of possibilities there. And then at the end, he overhears people saying there's like this hero who's come to the Shattered Plains. And so he takes off at a run, and he goes and sees Dalinar shaking hands with none other than Amaram.